She was smiling when she said it. Not a wide grin, not even warm, just that corporate smile, the one that stretches too far but never reaches the eyes. I sat across from her, spine straight, hands folded, a yellow legal pad in front of me, though I wasn't taking notes. Behind her, 3 framed posters. One said, "Work well, live well." Another had a cartoon brain in lotus pose, and the third was just a watercolor blob with the word balance under it. "I just want to begin by saying how much we appreciate your years of dedication," she started, voice syrupy. I already knew. The email had been vague. Touch base at 10? Just a quick sync. That tone, that vagueness. You don't work somewhere 30 years without learning how bad news dresses itself. She kept talking. Something about organizational agility and adaptive workflows, words I'd learned to translate into something simpler over the years. "We're moving on. You're not part of it. You're an incredible asset, George," she said, leaning forward as if that made it sincere. "But truthfully, the board's moving us into a direction that values flexibility, creative time, flow." I nodded once. She glanced at her screen like she needed backup from the bullet points she'd probably practiced with HR. "Your track record is spotless. Literally. You haven't missed a single deadline in over 3 decades. That kind of consistency is rare." Now she paused, letting the "but" sit in the air like stale coffee. "Some of the younger staff feel a bit constrained. There's this perception that your approach is, well, too rigid for the modern workplace." There it was. Too rigid. 3 decades. Not a single day late. I'd worked through food poisoning once. I'd sent in deliverables from a hospital bed after getting stitched up from a car crash. I'd missed holidays, anniversaries, even my father's funeral, because a rollout was going live that week. And now I was too rigid. I felt my jaw clench. I didn't let it show. She continued, almost cheerfully. "We're bringing in someone who aligns with our current vision. She's got a really fresh perspective, hosts a podcast on mindful productivity, huge following with the younger demo." That's all I said. She believes in intuitive scheduling, flexible deliverables. She even builds nap breaks into her calendar. I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I realized how tired I actually was. "We're offering a generous severance," she added quickly. "And of course, full benefits for the next 6 months. HR can go over the transition. We're not looking to make this painful." I nodded again. The silence between us was the most honest thing in the room. Then I stood, slow and deliberate. I took one last look at my corner of the office. The clean desk, the old black mug I always kept washed, the paper calendar pinned with red check marks. 30 years in that space, and not a single stain on the carpet under my chair. I left it all there. No handshake, no outburst, not even a good luck. Just silence, the kind that means you don't deserve a word from me. The train ride home was quiet too. Midday, not many people on board. I sat near the window, staring out at rows of identical buildings blurring by. My reflection looked like a ghost against the glass. A man in a pressed shirt, tie still perfect, back straight. In my head, I had conversations that would never happen. Told her exactly what I thought of her vision. Listed every time I'd saved her from a deadline disaster with nothing but duct tape, spreadsheets, and 4 hours of sleep. I imagined her face as I shredded the HR packet and dropped it on her desk. Imagined walking into that boardroom and asking them, when did dependability become a liability? But I didn't say any of it. I just sat there. At one point, a kid with AirPods was laughing at something on his phone. I watched him for a long time. He couldn't have been more than 23. I wondered if he would be someone's supervisor one day, if he'd look at someone like me and see a dinosaur. When I got home, The house was exactly how I'd left it. Clean, orderly, predictable. The thermostat set to 70. The mail stacked by the door. The kitchen spotless. I walked into the study and placed my laptop bag on the chair. Then I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the keycard. The same one I'd carried for 15 years. Worn plastic. Black strip scratched. It had survived 4 office moves, 2 mergers, and 1 fire drill that turned out to be a gas leak. I placed it gently on the table next to a photo frame. In the picture, I'm shaking hands with the CEO from 2 regimes ago. My hair is darker. My smile, easier. The plaque in the frame reads, 25 Years of Excellence, George Halley. I stared at it for a while. Then I sat down, loosened my tie, and let the silence settle around me like an old friend. 3 days after I nodded and walked out, I woke up at 5:47 a.m., still set from habit. My body didn't get the memo. Neither did my bathroom mirror, which greeted me with the same tired face, same neatly combed gray streaks, same shaving kit, lined up by height, like obedient soldiers. I stood there in the silence, razor in hand, steam rising. I shaved, I showered. I got dressed in my usual blue shirt and slacks. No meetings, no office, just muscle memory. Then I sat at the kitchen table and stared at nothing. The house was dead quiet. No whir of coffee brewing. I hadn't even turned on the lights. The sun hadn't fully risen, and the shadows stretched long across the floor. My hands were folded. I could still feel the indent of my watch strap even though I hadn't put it on. I'd always been the guy people could count on, not just at work, though that's where it mattered. Early in my career, I made a name for myself as the fixer. Didn't matter what broke. Timelines, budgets, tempers. I was the one who smoothed it over, quietly, efficiently. I remember working through the flu one winter, sweating through my undershirt, nose raw from tissues, delivering a client presentation with a voice that cracked every 3rd word. Still closed the deal. I missed my niece's 3rd birthday because an offshore server migration hit a snag. I remember being on a Zoom call while my brother texted me pictures of cake and confetti. "Wish you were here," he'd said. I'd replied with a thumbs-up emoji. That was 5 years ago. I haven't seen her since. Back then, I told myself it was worth it, that it meant something, that someday someone would look at all I'd built and understand. But now, I was the guy with an empty morning and no reason to wear slacks. By 7:30, I was scrolling. I don't know why I opened the company intranet. Maybe I wanted to see if they'd deactivated my credentials. They hadn't. I could still log in, still had access to the announcements feed. And there he was. Bright smile, neon hoodie, holding a smoothie in one hand and doing a thumbs up with the other. Behind him, my old desk. The caption read, "New energy, no more dinosaurs, nap and thrive." The comments were worse. "Love the vibe shift. Finally, some Gen Z energy in here. Time to break the old mold. Let's reimagine how we work." No mention of what the job actually was. No project status updates. Just filters and hashtags and praise for breaking tradition. Something in me split. Not loudly, not with yelling or smashing furniture or breaking down into sobs. Just a quiet snap, like the seam of an old shoe coming apart. You don't hear it happen, not really, but you feel it every time your foot lands a little differently. I stood up and walked to the window. My backyard looked the same as always. Perfect rows of grass, trimmed hedges, the rusted barbecue no one had touched in years. I used to mow on Sunday afternoons, right after sending out my pre-week planning emails. Now I couldn't even bring myself to fold the towel I'd left on the counter. I wasn't angry at him. Not really. He was just a kid, riding a wave someone else created. The system made him. The same system that once made me. I was angry at what the company had become. at how quickly everything I'd poured myself into became irrelevant. I sat down at my desk, my home desk, the one I never used because I was always at the office, and opened a blank document. For a second, I just stared at the cursor blinking, like it was waiting for permission. Then I started typing. I wasn't sure who it was for at first. HR, my former team, myself. But eventually I started writing to the board. Not a rant, not a revenge letter, a report. It began with numbers, how team output had dropped steadily since the shift to flex work policies, how project timelines now averaged 11% longer despite doubling the number of wellness initiatives, how customer satisfaction had dipped, complaints up, accountability down. I added charts, historical comparisons, quotes from employee surveys I'd archived. Then I layered in my own observations about what it meant to build culture, to set expectations and meet them, about discipline, not as punishment, but as a gift, a structure people could rely on. It wasn't sentimental, it was precise, just like everything I'd ever done. When I was done, I didn't feel better. I felt alert. I didn't send it, not yet. I saved it as a draft and renamed the file, day0.pdf. The cursor stopped blinking. The house remained silent. I looked again at the photo of my younger self, smiling beside a CEO who was long gone. We were holding a plaque between us, like it meant something permanent. Then I looked at the clock. It was 9 a.m. The day after never had officially begun. It started like any other morning. I made coffee, out of habit more than desire. Sat down in front of the computer in my home office, still wearing a dress shirt, though I'd stopped bothering with slacks. My cursor hovered over the file I'd named day0.pdf. For 3 days, I hadn't opened it. On the 4th, I did. The words were still sharp. I hadn't dulled them with time. If anything, the pause had made them cut cleaner. No outbursts, no caps lock, just facts. I added more. A section on the Wellness Wednesdays rollout that had led to an 18% dip in midweek task completion. A line graph showing the correlation between decreased structured meeting times and increased departmental friction. Screenshots of internal emails, redacted but telling, where managers admitted they were losing control of timelines, but didn't want to stifle creativity. And then there was the culture survey, the one no one really looked at beyond the summary slide. I had the full results. Question 14. Do you feel your contributions are clearly evaluated? 62% answered, rarely or never. I ended with a single paragraph. I read it out loud as I typed, "You didn't fire me for failing. You fired me because I reminded you of what used to work. And somewhere along the line, working became the enemy." I attached the charts, rechecked the footnotes. Then I clicked send. The email went to 6 people, the full board. No CCs, no BCCs, no preamble. Just a clean subject line, regarding recent structural shifts. Then I sat back, sipped my coffee, and waited for silence. And silence came. No response that day, none the next. By the 3rd day, I assumed it had been dismissed, maybe flagged by a board assistant as retired employee feedback, maybe skimmed and archived. It stung more than I'd expected. I'd told myself I didn't care, but part of me had hoped the data would be undeniable. I hadn't written a tantrum. I'd written a thesis. On the 5th day, I got an email. Subject: coffee. From Lauren McKay, board member, the one nobody quoted in meetings, the one who listened more than she spoke. The body of the message read, I've read it twice. Let's talk. No signature, no pleasantries, just that. I stared at the screen for a long time before I responded. We scheduled a call. She didn't waste time. "This reads like a post-mortem," she said. "In some ways it is." "You've still got your access badge?" "Not anymore." "I want you to come in anyway." A week passed between that call and the meeting she set up. I told no one, not even my brother, who'd been texting to check in more than usual. I didn't want to say anything until I knew what this was. A conversation? A trap? An apology? That same week, the podcaster decided to send a company-wide email. Subject: Vibe Audit. It was a meme dump, a collage of low-res images, old workplace photos overlaid with captions like, "Back in my day, we died at our desks," and "When you schedule a meeting for 8 a.m. because joy is illegal." One of the photos was of me. It was a candid shot someone had taken at my retirement lunch. Me, cutting into a sheet cake with "Thank you, George" in block letters. The meme caption read, "When you've never missed a deadline, but also never blinked." The email was meant to be funny. It went viral, internally. Then externally. Someone leaked it. I didn't need to look at the comments. I saw the headlines. Tech firm mocks loyal veteran in meme campaign. Gen Z culture clash, goes public. Number sign, no more dinosaurs, backfires. The stock dropped 3%, and then the real email came. Not from Lauren this time, from the full board. "We'd like to speak with you, in person." The building looked the same, but smaller. Security recognized me. One of the receptionists smiled like she'd seen a ghost. I was escorted up to the 22nd floor, where I'd only been twice before. The boardroom was glass and chrome, with views of the skyline and a coffee bar no one used. Lauren met me at the door. She didn't smile, just said, "They're ready." I stepped inside. 6 board members, leather chairs, bottles of still water. Silence, then a cough. Then the chairperson nodded to the seat across the table. "We'd like your insights," he said, more formally. I didn't sit right away. Instead, I walked to the far window and looked out. The view stretched wide, glass and concrete, cranes and clouds, a city still building, always building. Behind me, a chair scraped softly as someone pulled it out for me. I turned, took a breath, and sat down. I didn't want the coffee. That's how I knew I wasn't the same. They offered it the moment I walked into the smaller boardroom. Different floor, less glass, no skyline. Probably thought the view made things too abstract, too distant. This one had a whiteboard, a ficus, and chairs that squeaked when people shifted. Lauren sat on my left. The rest of the board flanked the long oval table, with the CEO, a man I'd trained once years ago, back when he still asked for advice, at the far end. He leaned forward, elbows on the polished wood. "George, we'd like you to consider coming back. Not full-time, not in your old role. We'd like you to consult. Quietly." I blinked. "Help us recalibrate," he went on. "Bridge the gap, realign some of the excesses." He meant the memes, the backlash, the drop in stock, the headlines. He meant, clean this up. Lauren said, "This isn't about PR. We're losing structure. Teams are drifting. We need a spine again." I wanted to laugh, not out loud, just enough for them to hear the breath catch. But I didn't. I just looked at my hands. "You're not offering me a job," I said. "You're offering me the same hammer and asking me to patch new holes." "No," the CEO said carefully. "We're offering you the chance to fix what's broken." That's when it hit me. They still didn't get it. It wasn't just broken. It was rotted. "You think structure is the issue," I said. "But it's deeper. You replaced accountability with slogans, metrics with vibes. You made consistency a liability." "We know," Lauren said. That's why we're here. Do you? I said. I missed my father's funeral to deliver a prototype demo to Tokyo. I had strep throat and led a 3-hour training. I canceled 2 vacations, non-refundable, because rollout windows shifted, and no one ever said thank you. They just assumed I'd be there, because I always was. The room went still. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. My voice was steady, low, but something raw had broken through. I gave you everything, I said, and in return, I got a handshake and a fruit basket. That's not a system I want to fix. That's a system I want to rebuild. The CEO exchanged a glance with Lauren, then nodded slowly. Then help us do that. They slid a single-page proposal across the table. Task Force Lead, Rebalancing Innovation with Integrity. Fancy title, vague scope, no direct reports, full autonomy. I stared at it. This is either redemption, I said, or manipulation. No one's forcing you, Lauren said. You'd have full authority. Say what needs to be said. Do what needs to be done. But we need a voice that understands both ends of this machine. Someone who remembers why we had structure and who knows how it went off the rails. They weren't wrong. I'd seen both sides now. I'd worn the tie and sat in the dark. I'd felt the silence of sudden irrelevance. And now, I was being offered a stage. But I wasn't interested in whispers behind closed doors. I'll do it, I said, but not quietly. No task force behind glass walls. I want the first word in front of everyone. Live, all hands. The CEO frowned. That's unconventional. So is nap scheduling and meme emails, I said. Consider it balance. A pause, a breath, then a nod. You'll have 10 minutes. I only need 7. They scheduled it for a Friday, noon. The entire company invited, remote and in person. It wasn't branded. No colorful slides, just my name on the invite. A conversation with George Halley. The night before, I barely slept. Not from nerves, from clarity. I walked through my house and saw things differently. The walls I'd ignored. The books I never read. The guest room that had never hosted anyone. 30 years of discipline. But for what? The company didn't love me back. It tolerated me, used me, rewarded results, not humanity. And now I was walking back into it, but not as the same man. The stage lights were warm, too warm. I stood behind the podium while the AV team clipped a mic to my collar. Thousands of employees were tuning in, some in the crowd, most on screens. I looked out. I saw faces I didn't recognize. Youth, movement, people sipping smoothies and tapping their phones. I took a breath. Then I reached for the mic. My hand trembled just once. Then I adjusted it, and I began. I tapped the mic. It buzzed. Someone coughed. The lights were too bright, but I squinted through them, scanning the sea of faces. Some curious, some skeptical, a few visibly annoyed. The live stream was running, thousands more watching remotely. I cleared my throat. Well, I said, I haven't spoken in front of this many people since the fire drill in 2012, when I had to explain why we couldn't evacuate before finishing the quarterly report. A few nervous chuckles, one loud laugh. I let it hang a second, then continued. I was told I had 10 minutes. I said I only needed 7. That was a lie. But I've already broken protocol by agreeing to speak publicly. So let's keep the rebellion going. More laughter, lighter now. The tension cracked, just enough. I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm not going to list grievances or try to rewind the clock. I've had time to think about what I want to say, what needs to be said, and I've realized something important. I wasn't perfect. Far from it. I looked down for a moment, just to give the silence some weight. I was rigid. I was obsessive. I was terrified of missing a deadline, terrified that if I let one ball drop, the whole illusion would crumble, that I would crumble. I measured my worth in deliverables and inbox zeros, and I wore that like a badge, not realizing it was eating me alive. I let that hang. I could feel eyes on me, not just watching, but seeing. That was new. But here's the thing, I continued. Structure isn't the enemy. Routine isn't oppression. We've swung so far in the opposite direction that we've started mistaking chaos for creativity. I raised a hand. Freedom without purpose isn't freedom. It's drift. And drift doesn't build products. It doesn't build trust. It doesn't build people. A pause. A cough somewhere in the back. But no one left. Not yet. We replaced systems with slogans, purpose with perks, accountability with ambiance, and we wondered why things stopped making sense. I let that land, then took a step forward. You don't need to go back to how it was, but you do need to understand what was actually working. I wasn't the only one keeping this place running. There were dozens like me, people who stayed late, who remembered launch dates when calendars failed, who carried 1,000 quiet burdens without applause, because it wasn't about ego. It was about doing the job. My voice was steady now, no shaking, no hesitation. And yes, I understand times change, expectations shift. That's normal. But throwing out the foundation in the name of vibes isn't innovation. It's immaturity. It's the same as building a house with no blueprint because someone said lines are too limiting. I scanned the room again. Then I saw him. Front row, neon hoodie, that smoothie in his lap, the podcaster, the one who replaced me. I pointed at him, not accusingly, just clearly. You, I said. You're not the enemy. A hush fell over the room. You're just untrained. You were thrown into a system that gave you no mentorship, no boundaries, and no respect for the craft of consistency. They made you the symbol. That's the real problem. You shouldn't have been handed a department. You should have been handed a notebook and a mentor. He blinked, didn't move, didn't smile, just listened. That's what needs to change, not just policies, culture. You don't have to worship structure, but you damn well better understand what it's for. I stepped back to the podium. This company will survive, but only if it remembers that freedom and responsibility aren't opposites. They're partners. They need each other. I paused. One last breath. And if we start there, we have a chance, not just to fix what's broken, but to build something better. I clicked off the mic. For a moment, nothing. Then a few claps. Then more. Applause. Not thunderous, not unanimous, but real. Some people stood, some didn't. A few walked out. HR looked like they wanted to disappear into the walls. I didn't wait for a debrief. I stepped off the stage. He caught me near the elevator. The podcaster. Hey, he said, nervous. That was not what I expected. Good, I said. I didn't mean to mock you with the email. I thought it was just funny. I didn't think. I know, I said. He hesitated. Can you show me how you did it, the way you worked? I looked at him. He wasn't cocky now, just lost, like a kid with a spark but no compass. Sure, I said, but we start with no naps. He laughed, real this time. Fair enough. I didn't take a car home. I walked. It felt different. The city felt mine again. And when I got home, I didn't sit in silence. I picked up the phone and dialed my sister. She answered after 2 rings. George? Hey, I said. I've got time now. Let's catch up. She didn't say anything for a second. Then, I'd like that. Later that night, I checked my calendar. There it was. 9 a.m. First day of doing it right.